And good evening, everybody, or good night if you're in the other side of the world. Um, Liverpool versus Napoli. We don't have to be sad today. It was a nice 2-0 win. And surprising 2-0 win to me because I missed the Nunez goal. I totally turned away from the television to set up for here. I completely missed that one. So I had to go look at it on
But you were
YouTube there.
probably grabbing a snack, is what I'm guessing.
Yes, I was grabbing a few bites, as they say. But it looked done and dusted. But it wasn't. We went right to the death. An interesting game. Not maybe the most exciting game, but definitely two teams that are looking to make an impact in the Champions League this season. Temujin, how did you see the game?
I'll be honest, I'm not going to kind of like change what I was saying in the beginning based on the score now. I was not too thrilled with the lineup. I mean, we talked before. I kind of was hoping for more rotation, prioritizing the weekend game. Mind you, Spurs had a huge battle that group is a hot mess, by the way. That was just like a ridiculous turnaround within an hour there. But so they had their tough game as well. But I kind of wanted to see more rotation because this was a huge risk to play a lot of your guys against a team that's in form, because a poor results only makes your morale and confidence go in the gutter even more. So I feel like it's a risk that's slightly paid off, because at least you kind of, maybe these players needed to show themselves that they still got it. I mean, we don't know, like we're like, when is it going to come? When is it going to come? We're looking for different reasons and stuff like that. Maybe they needed to show it to themselves that they still got it and keep up with and beat a team that's, is one of probably the best teams in Europe right now.
I think they certainly have been drilled into near perfection from Spalletti's point of view. He's an excellent coach in general, but they really look like they know what they're doing. However, having said that, it seemed like part of their game plan was to injure as many of our players as possible. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was like a weirdly cold game too, right? I mean, I kind of like the fact that they tried to let the game go, but there were like a lot of things where you're like, dude, what is going on? But I mean, in some ways, I think I would rather see a Napoli team that's really going at it that we're beating, as opposed to a Napoli team that was, already bagged the group leadership and, kind of just playing along. And I think this is a bit more satisfying this way, because it was a team that was fighting that we beat, as opposed to, what I mean? Like, because that's what we're lacking right now, the physicality, the fight. So it was, I think, in some ways better that we had an Italian team that's out there fighting against it.
Wrapping the whole kind of thing up in terms of rotation and then the tackles that were flying in, it seems to me like, and I know there was discussion on the Discord channel, which everybody should sign up to about this, but it seems to me that Milner went off with a head injury, with a concussion. He looked like he pointed to his head, or to his eyes when he came on the field, or just before he came off the field, before he sat down. Was it worth risking Milner in this game?
I mean, you got to put somebody out there, right? I mean, if we're talking about rotation, I mean, who's going to play? And if you picked, let's say, I mean, if you said, hey, we got to rotate more people, like I'm saying, I mean, it wouldn't be Milner that I would have taken out of the midfield. It would have been Thiago or somebody like that. So either way, Milner was going to be there. I think it's a different conversation we're having if it was Thiago that got injured, or if it was Fabinho that got injured. And I did not understand that. So obviously he had that injury. What was it, like 40th minute or so, right? In the first half. And then he kind of like gets up, which we were just having this conversation in the morning coffee show about, the concussion protocol and stuff like that in soccer in the Premier League, and probably should be checked out before he comes back in. But he, Milner being Milner, he comes back on. It almost felt like when he came out, he was showing a muscle in his leg, but then Klopp was showing the head. And I kind of almost took that as Klopp was trying to make sure that we bought ourselves time for the substitution by using the concussion as the issue, as opposed to a pull muscle. Because if it's a pull muscle, they're going to trot out Milner over there, and we're going to play with 10 people for a couple of minutes with, while Elliott gets ready. But because it was due to the concussion in the first half, I felt like we kind of milked that, where, they let Milner sit in the middle of the field while Elliott was getting ready.
I think, though, on top of that, if it was a concussion in the first incident and they put him back on the field, then they were being very, very foolish, which is what leads me to believe that it probably was a concussion. Not a concussion, but a suspected concussion, which they didn't probably test at half time. But either way, it kind of changed the balance of the team a bit, but I would say almost for the better, because it seemed to me, see if you agree or not, when we put the young kids on, the energy levels just jumped instantly for that last 10, 15 minutes or whatever it was. Almost like what we've been saying all along about the tiredness and the fresh legs and the mental fatigue was correct. And suddenly this burst of fresh players who had legs and energy to burn just suddenly lifted, as the chefs on the television show said, elevated the entire dish for that last few minutes, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a bunch of kids with something to prove, and it's nothing else. It's fresh legs, and half of our game with the pressing is those fresh legs. Maybe they're not going to make the right decision in the final third, or not going to be as good in a tight space with the ball or something like that. But the energy you gain with that press and winning the ball back, I think more than offsets that. And that's really frustrating, that, something that, I know we've criticized in the past on the pod about like Klopp not doing these changes and getting these guys, even if it's 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, so that the guy you're taking off is also getting 10 minutes, 15 minutes rest. So it's a win-win. You're saving some legs and you're using some fresh legs. Not sure why we do not do it more. And that was one of the reasons why I was hoping for more of a rotation in the starting 11 today. Didn't happen. Like I say, it was risky, but it feels like, I guess we'll find out when we face Spurs over the weekend, but it feels like it was a risk that paid off.
We saw Konate back starting in the defense. He looked a tiny bit rusty, but otherwise, I thought he showed us exactly what we've been missing in the back. And he had all the strength of Virgil van Dijk, but also carrying that ball forward, like we know you've Matip to do so much.
Yeah, it's great to have the dude back. And I think, in set pieces, it makes us a lot more dangerous, because instead of just focusing on Van Dijk, you have to account for Konate as well. And now you throw Nunez in there, and that's how we got the second goal, or I guess the first goal. So it becomes a lot more dangerous. It's a lot tougher to defend on set pieces. So yeah, it's definitely good to have Konate back. Like I said, between him, he's definitely our number 2 right now, I think, in that depth chart, if you will. And then when Matip gets back, obviously he would be the third, because he brings that elements. And you get some of that from Konate, right? Like moving forward with the ball. It looks not as technical. It looks a lot more physical, but not as technical as Matip coming up with that ball.
Yeah, he definitely gives us that extra dimension that we missed that then maybe when Gomez is in there with Van Dijk.
Let me ask you that. Why do you think that is? Because Gomez is a guy who plays right back at times. So he definitely has the foot skills. He definitely has the pace. Do you think that's like Gomez's confidence? He doesn't want to lose turn the ball over there? Or is he told, you know what, just do your gig. Don't worry about pushing up?
I think it's possibly maybe a little from column A, a little from column B, but I think it's mostly that he is a fullback, not a centre half, and he's probably more worried about focusing on the central defending job than he is on just playing his game. It would be interesting, though, to see, it'll never happen, but Alexander-Arnold in that same position at centre back, if he would do the exact same things. Although we have seen that in that tucked in central midfield position he takes up sometimes, that he does carry the ball forward. So with Gomez, it's probably, as I say, like a little bit of a confidence issue in that he doesn't want to mess up completely. I can't imagine Klopp restricting players, though. He never seems to be that kind of a manager that says players can't go forward. So it goes back to what I said in the post-match on the weekend, is maybe Gomez is not quite the Liverpool level player that we would expect in the centre-half position. To be fair, given how many great players we've had in those positions, especially ball-playing central defenders. But it's just good to have that element in there, because Van Dijk can do it when he wants to, and then when you have a second defender that can do it, suddenly you get that unpredictability, don't you?
Yeah, I think that's where it helps. I mean, that's why I always like Matip, especially when we're home against a team that's sets up with a low block. He always has that infusion. And that's why I'm always shocked at why we do not see it as much from Gomez. Because, like you're saying, Van Dijk can do it. I almost feel like Van Dijk is maybe not necessarily told, like you're saying. I don't know if Klopp like definitely instructs, but it's probably priority is covering the back and not really where focusing on because he has that diagonal ball weapon that like Van Dijk uses, so he doesn't necessarily have to pick up the dribble and like push the ball forward that way. With Konate and Matip, I mean, that's their strength. I've always thought, that would be something that would be great to see from Gomez. But I think that's the issue with Gomez is the lack of confidence. I mean, the ball he lost in midfield, for example, to in the Nottingham Forest game that led to the free kick and stuff like that. It's just like he almost like doubts himself, like not decisive in what he does. And I think that's when you make mistakes. And that's probably the issue. I still feel he is more than good enough to be like the number 4, maybe the number 3. But at the same time, especially since he's English, it's a guy you can probably, well, not right now, probably his stock is pretty low, but it might be a guy. I love Gomez, but it might be a smart business move to get a lot of money for him because of that English part of the ordeal, a center back, and then invest it elsewhere.
I mean, it's to finish up on Gomez. It's not that he's a bad player, but he just doesn't strike you as like he's never going to be the man at the back. He's never going to be the key player in a back 4 for us.
Yeah, he's definitely not Batman. He's more Robin.
Núñez involved in both goals today. It's nice to see that coming together for him finally, isn't it?
It's nice to have another guy up top. I mean, with us missing Diaz, and man, this really hurts because when you look at, how defenders react, there's a way they react when Mo gets the ball, right? You're like, is he going to keep it close? Is he going to cut? Is he going to suddenly kick out the space? You don't get that as much with Bobby because you're not worried as much about the pace. You can tell when people are defending Núñez, their mind is going all over the place. You can almost like see the defender think, like, is he going to suddenly get going? Because he has a ridiculous burst, but he can also cut in and take the shot. So it's a hard guy to defend. It really hurts because you add Diaz to that on the left-hand side. You have 3 guys who scared the shit out of defenders when they're running with the ball at them. It's going to be something special. I think the kid is going to be good. I wish still that his exuberance, I don't know what the good word for it is, would not get the better of him and get these like silly yellows and silly. It was a soft yellow, but it is a yellow. And I wish he would kind of stay out of those. It's almost like he's got to channel that aggressive attitude to just the game and stay out of that. Because as you see it, he's already gotten 1 red, right? As you see this more and more, and I know that there's a lot of old timers who will feast off of that and get under your skin to get you in trouble with a yellow or a red.
I think I agree on that, but I also think he's very, very like Suarez, and that he's just a street kid who plays soccer really, really, really well, and has that. Because I remember, because I was a street soccer player, as I'm sure you were as well. There's just that little bit of aggression you have to have when you play, because there's only one ball, and if you don't get it, you're not going to see it for a long, long time. Especially if the game is 40 players per team, as sometimes happens. But you. Just as with Suarez, we loved Suarez, but we needed him to have that little bit of snarl about, and we kind of need that snarl about Núñez as well, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a good piece. It's just unlucky that any other season, I think he would have a lot easier time settling in. He's always going to be compared to Haaland, who's having a ridiculous season. So this is kind of like an opportunity where, Haaland is injured and stuff. He's getting a lot of game time. I think it was more precautionary than anything else, probably not playing. So we'll definitely see him against Spurs. So I think it's a good time for him. And then obviously the World Cup is coming right around the corner. But yeah, I think he's going to be a good piece. Like I say, I wish it didn't happen because I think it would be a lot easier on the kid if in his mind, I'm sure, or he reads everywhere that he's being compared to Haaland, who's having like a ridiculous season.
To drop it back in a line to the midfield, I think we talked about Milner already. there was comments on Discord about Fabinho just looking leggy, which he has done pretty much all season. But for me, watching the game, my question mark would have been over Thiago, because he's starting to get a little bit inconsistent with his technique, isn't he?
Yeah, because I mean, he's there for that key pass, right? Like in the build-up. And sometimes, you just watch the dude and you're like, it's like his skill on the ball, how relaxed he is, and how calm he is on the ball. You're like, oh man. But sometimes it almost feels a little lackadaisical where he can turn the ball over, or he kind of like takes an extra half a second trying to do something on it, and he can get caught on the ball. And he's not, even though for a little guy he's good in the air and stuff like that, in terms of going up for like those balls. When he's being pressured, when somebody is on his shoulder, he's not always going to get the foul. And you saw it today. A couple of times he got it, a couple of times he didn't. And when they put that pressure on him with a couple of guys suddenly like coming down on him, he loses the ball in like dangerous spots. I think if anything, that's why he would be a guy that I would have normally rested and gotten him more fresh legs. I know he's not going to go to the World Cup and we're almost there kind of thing, but I don't know, you bring the young kid in and you can kind of see the energy, and he's a kid that's self-confident too. Why not give him more minutes? And I know we wanted to win this game, obviously based on the lineup we put out there, but at the same time, you got to think of the big picture. Either way, we're in the same spot we were before the beginning of the day. Why not give him some more less miles on those legs so he's ready for the Spurs game?
Speaking of the kids, it was really good to see Calvin Ramsey back on the field, wasn't it? And he did not do too shabby at all in his brief appearance, did he?
Yeah, he's alive and well. That's good to see. I mean, we were talking about that, like I think in the podcast as well as like this morning. Like, will he get a start kind of thing? Maybe it was too soon for that, but again, I wish he would have gotten more minutes. But I think it's a great sign for the future because you can tell. I know people are like, Trent should be benched. He's too cocky and stuff. I mean, he's probably, just because you're young doesn't mean you don't get tired and leggy. I mean, it's not like, it's not infinite energy. We've been there, done that. So I think giving him some rest would go a long way as well. I mean, aside from like League Cup and stuff like that, I mean, we've seen it where, it would be nice to have a Ramsey come off the bench as a right back instead of, for example, Milner come off the bench as a right back in terms of the energy and what he brings to the game. Who, by the way, Milner was, his energy levels look a lot higher than everybody else somehow whenever he plays.
I mean, to be fair, he's probably the basis of the entire Incredible Hulk experiment. They probably just took a vial of his blood and his own self-emitting gamma rays and decided to figure out what made him who he was. I mean, the only reason why there was a $6 million man is because they couldn't afford James Milner, who was about $20 million at the time. And he was only two.
Dude has the energy, and I think he's smart. Obviously, he does not have the agility and the speed anymore. But for the most part, I think because of his experience, he can position himself where those are not like a weakness. I mean, I guess they still are in some ways, but not a liability, I guess maybe I should say.
I think, like, he's going to be, when you think about it, he's going to be one of those guys on the BBC website where they do a little article on him because he's still playing in a pub league at 57 years old or 62 years old or something like that, isn't it? It's going to be him and his little juice box of Ribena and no hair, a grey hair, wispy away when he's 70, tackling players like it's going out of fashion.
I mean, that's the thing, like you were talking about like the aging midfield and who's going to come, who's going to go and stuff like that. We need to bring so many people in and stuff. But I think there's something to be said. And I think Klopp likes that, maybe to a fault in terms of A, loyalty, B, having those guys who set the example, right, to the young kids, to everybody else on the squad. So I think in that sense, he's valuable. I mean, God knows how long this guy can go, man. It's just, I feel like either an injury is going to stop him, which I hope it's not, or he's going to just like go into a coaching role or a coach manager or something like that and just kind of walk away that way. Because I would hate to see him go to another team and keep playing. I would rather have him either like retire and move on, unless maybe he goes back to Leeds and comes off the bench like in the 80th minute or something like that to kick the young guys' asses or something.
I don't know. Like I could see him, going to Leeds in the championship, maybe. Not to be bad about Jesse Marsh or anything like that, but let's say that would be the ideal thing because he would be the experienced
Little
head.
foreshadowing there. I see what you did.
A little foreshadowing then. But also, you could. I know a few ex-professionals, and the one thing that about them is that they all love to play. They still love to play. Like even because they're so super fit, their bodies haven't broken down like us mere mortals yet, so they're still able to play. But I could see him. I think you're right. I think number one, you could see him just smoothly transition into a coaching role in about 5 years' time, and then everybody who plays under him writes an autobiography 10 years after that saying we hated having to play against him because he kicked all of our ankles every single day in training, even at 62 years old.
I mean, I don't know if you watched the press conference yesterday with Milner on there, and I think like the way he talks, the things he says and stuff like that. I mean, he will be. I know, we all love Gerrard and stuff like that, but when you compare those two guys, even if you throw Hando into the equation, you can kind of tell Milner is probably much better suited to be a manager down the road in terms of his vision overall, how he reacts to things and the things he says and how he carries himself. I think, he is probably, I can see him being a very good manager if he wants to be down the road.
I think just to wrap the James Milner thing up is basically if I know anything about coaches is the ones that get through it all, like who maybe not the most successful, but ones who stay in it long term have just a very bleak sense of humor about things in life, and he definitely does that. If you follow his Twitter account, he's one of the funniest soccer players that I've ever seen. Let's look overall at the group now. Napoli forced us second on goal difference in game, head-to-head things and all that stuff. Ajax third, they go into the Europa League, and then Rangers with 0 points. Is it time for pretty much everybody in Scottish football to accept that their clubs are just not able for this level of football?
And I think, last season's Europa run gave hope against that, but I think it was kind of more the exception than the rule overall, right? I mean, sometimes you can kind of get good matchups or get lucky in a couple of games and have a good run, even if you're not getting a good season, or sometimes, you end up eliminating a team that is actually better than you on paper and even on the field, but it just like lines up your way. And I think so too. I mean, more than anything else, I was watching that they did manage to at least go to Europa, but Sporting, I mean, at one point they were winning the group, and then they were just crashing in 30 minutes. They were crashing out of Europe. And then thanks to a late Spurs goal in the 96 minutes or whatever, 97 minutes or whatever it was, they end up at least going to Europa over there. I thought that was like the shocker of the day over there. That has to be a roller coaster of emotions for those guys. But Rangers, yeah, I mean, you got to kind of look at this and be like, maybe we don't want to be in the Champions League.
I mean, because Celtic haven't done that well either. I think they've only got 1 point out the entire campaign.
I think so, yeah.
It really is not. It's the reality hitting, because I remember Brendan Rodgers getting thrown from pillar to post by Celtic fans, Liverpool fans, and pretty much all other fans alike for Celtic's performances. But he at least got them points on the board, and they were in groups with Barcelona and Bayern Munich and Manchester City, to be fair, and PSG. Like that, it's not like they had the Arab group was tough for Rangers, but it was still not Ajax, as their main competition. So they're not even as good as the Dutch level teams. So maybe a bit of a reality check is in store for the Scottish.
I find it similar to
supporters.
Like Turkish teams in that sense, like where you better use your home advantage. And, like obviously Turkish teams do. And, we know like Rangers do. You better get the most out of that and, like convert it into points or wins or something like that. And when you go away, you're just going to hope that your over the top focus is going to get you something and you have some skilled players who are going to pull something. Otherwise, your overall league competition probably does not prepare you well to play against some of the big boys in Europe. And you could kind of tell overall how they can fight, But at the end of the day, it's not just about, fighting and running and pushing and shoving. You do need players who can make things happen on the ball and convert chances, create chances and stuff like that to be able to kind of keep going further and not just, we were in it for the first 35 minutes kind of an ordeal. Here's what I wanted to ask you, by the way, because I know we talked about this before. What did you think of Jones?
I put him in the same category as Gomez a little bit. I think he had a lot of potential, but the injury just ripped like something. His confidence probably more than anything else right out of him. I think he tries things that he's not able to do quite yet. And then sometimes he'll go right into his shell and play too safely. I hope he's young enough to get over that injury thing, to get over that hump of, I'm not going to get injured again if I play hard. But I just don't see it. He has a mistake too many in him for a top level team who wants to dominate the defense and the ball. I think that's probably going to be something that's going to have him shifted out the door sooner.
I just have not figured out, and I don't know if he has figured out, like what his ideal position is. And I don't, is it just that we are not playing where he should be and not getting the most out of him that way? I mean, obviously playing him as a defensive mid was not a smart move, but even when we throw him on the left-hand side, he is better, but is that really a spot, or does he have to be that attacking mid that plays like right behind the center forward or the striker kind of a deal? I still have not figured out, because the way he plays, you don't want him doing build up, because he takes chances on the ball and he can turn the ball over, in the halfway line and really cause you troubles. So it's almost like you want him more like up the field to be doing that stuff. And I almost get the same feeling as Gomez with him. I think they are kind of constantly, as confident as that kid is with his feet, like the moves he does and stuff like that, I still think there is a little bit of second guessing going on that's nonstop. I don't know if it's the age or the fact that they don't get as many chances. And that's the part where I wish they would get more minutes. So at least you can eliminate that as a reason that, when they come in off the bench and they have 10 minutes, they're like, I got to do some shit in 10 minutes. Whereas, well, you know what? If nothing happens today, I got another 15 coming up next Thursday or something like that. I wish we would eliminate that reason. I just don't know what the reason is. It's kind of like a hard one to figure out with him.
I agree with pretty much everything you said, but I would also frame it as if you compare them to Harvey Elliott, who's of a similar age profile but looks way more mature than his years. I think the difference is Curtis Jones tries to speed the game up and plays too fast for himself, whereas Elliott tries to slow the game down and always plays within himself. Sometimes he almost want more from Elliott than he gives, because you can see that he has more. And I think it's just a maturity thing. And for a player like Jones, it seems like that's it. Like, he reminds me of Jordan Ebay and Dominic Solanke and all that. It's the talent is there, but the maturity might never be. You might never see that player that you thought you were going to get until they're like 27, 28. And we can't
maybe
wait that
like
long.
Good but not great, like good but not consistent, so therefore not great.
Like a Leicester City, West Ham level player, like a good player on a team like that, but just not good enough to be for teams like Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, even and United for their sins. When you bring a player in or you bring a player through, they have to be the man. They have to, like, for whatever position they're playing, they have to be the guy. Otherwise, it's just bench. It's just like a bench warmer, essentially. You get a few minutes. And for what we could maybe, as you said before, for Gomez or Jones or whoever, what we might get for them financially, that might help pay for the man, the guy who comes in and actually takes control of the job. So, it's no slight on these players, says the fat guy who had one fully played and it wasn't as good for either.
Hey, guess where I'm headed now? I'm going to the gym after this. You may have heard of it.
What's a gym?
No. Okay, it was either that.
I know Jim Morrison,
or adjust the camera settings, the zoom settings on the camera. So Since I don't know how to do the Zoom settings, I guess I'm gonna have to lose weight. So that's what I'm doing.
I'm getting widescreen. I'm getting a fish lens camera for me. But yeah, I think for Jones, it's just I don't think it'll happen for him. And if we get an offer, a good one, I think we should probably listen to him. But overall, a good game to watch. If you were anyway nervous, I think we controlled most of it. A good result, actually, a great result, just for confidence, if nothing else, following the Forest game and the Leeds game. And then we move on. We got Spurs and then Southampton, I believe. And then the big break.
With the cup game in between.
The cup game in between. So 3 more games to get to that break. And then we can all see what we do when everything returns after Christmas, after the World Cup. But I think, Tamuchin, I think there's not much more we could say about this particular game that won't be said on the morning coffee show and on the other podcasts. We have the EPL review show will be out very soon, today or tomorrow at the latest. So people should be making sure
editor gets to it. Yeah.
I don't like editors personally. I think you should fire them all. Idiots that they are. And then we will also have not the morning coffee, the fantasy show for those people, those losers like me who consistently lose their points every week because they don't do anything with their teams. My set it and forget it plan has failed miserably. I think I'm right there.
We got some 2 legit guys on there too. Like, it's not like, they're talking the talk, but they're kind of walking the walk at times too. I don't want to give them too much credit and give them big heads, but at least they're both doing well in points. So it's not like, we've had it before where, you take advice from a guy, you're like, dude, you're giving advice from this team, my team is doing better, kind of a deal. So we got some legit sources there now.
Yeah, they do a good job. Unfortunately, I don't listen to them, so I've nobody to blame but myself. But everybody should get on that, the Premier League show, review show with the duds and the studs and the match of the week, and then the fantasy football, so you're not a loser like me. And then, as well as that, everybody should like, subscribe, follow the Facebook page, follow the Twitter, follow the Discord for sure. Listen to us on Spotify. That's a major one, especially if you're driving in your car and you want to hear my nonsense in my stupid accent and the sound of potatoes falling out of my mouth. It's a good sound when you're crashing your car. Just remains to say, Tamuchin, enjoy the rest of your evening. Great to talk to you as always.
Thank you.
And everybody in American Scouser land, have a good one.
Take care.